Hey guys, welcome back to the layout once again. Today we have another layout update, and I think I'll just walk around the layout and point out things that I have done since the last update, because if I don't do that, I fear otherwise I will forget some things, and that way I can organize it pretty logically. So anyway, we'll start over here. This is Crawford, Nebraska. Really the only thing I've done so far in this area is I've started weathering track, and this is my sort of first attempt at track weathering. And I do have a video, actually either one video or I might split it up and do two, but I'm going to talk about how to weather the wooden tie track as well as the concrete track. Slightly different methods, but I think if I do it right, I'll just throw those into one video. So expect that in the next day or two. I've only really done from the portal here on that far track, that far main line, up through the junction, and then everything in here is weathered, including the wooden ties. Although I think I might lighten these up even a little more to make them a little more dusty and sort of dirt covered looking. And then I also continued the weathering down here past that little hill there, or up to it at least. So that's really all I've done so far. But if you take a closer look, you can see it does make quite a difference having the web of the rail painted, and as well as those rail clips. And I added some weathering powders as well. And then you can see I've just sort of dirtied up the wooden ties as well, painted the rails on those sections too. And you can see the difference between the mainline wooden ties like you see here, and then the helper pocket, industrial spur, or this is like an interchange track, but this spur over here, those three tracks are sort of all weathered similarly, whereas the mainline wooden ties are a little differently colored. So anyway, that's the first bit of track weathering I've done, and that's sort of the precursor to scenery. So once I get that out of the way in a particular area, then I can begin the scenery in that area. So yeah, once I get this all touched up and finished, then I might start putting dirt down, and then grass, trees, and ballast eventually. Another thing is I'm actually going to move this far grain spur in. So I extended it a little bit. That is new from last time, so I have to trim that rail there. But I'm actually going to move that track in so it's spaced about as far away from this main line as this track here is. Maybe even a little closer. And the reason for that is because I actually want to model the grain elevator that goes right there, and to do that I'm going to recycle this old I had this cement plant from the old layout. I've sort of torn it apart already, but what I'm going to do is basically cut it in half down the middle using one side of these silos, because the real Western Grains grain elevator in Crawford, Nebraska has sort of 4 main grain bins and then 2 larger bins on either end. So I'll buy those. Actually, it has, I think, 2 on this end and 1 on this end. Doesn't matter. I'll figure it out. But those will be Walther's kits that I'll probably purchase. But I do want to recycle some of this, or as much as I can. So that will go on the backdrop there. And of course, in order to do that, we need to move the track in. And the reason I had it back further originally is because in the prototype Crawford, there's quite a bit of a gap between these 2 tracks here, and I wanted to model that, but I figured if I'm going to compromise and not model the actual industry, I'd rather compromise the spacing rather than the physical building. So anyway, that'll be a fun build, and look forward to that coming together slowly. And so further on down this way, you can see I've done a little bit of landscaping here. So I finally filled in this side where I had cut out the fascia profile, and then I actually took out the original section of scenery substructure I had there. So you can see I've had to patch up the backdrop. I'll get to painting that pretty soon. But basically I'm just making really shallow little berms or shelves there, and this is pretty typical of the area right around Crawford and leading up to Belmont. So anyway, those are looking good in my opinion, and you can still see where I'm going to have the road. That'll be Annan Street. I've done a little bit more of that landscaping down here, or yeah, I guess you could call it landscaping. And then if you turn the corner here, this was the scenery that I had tested from last time. And if you remember, I had mentioned that I wanted to get grass that was a little bit taller. So I have done that, and this is sort of a revised mixture of scenery elements, if you will. So originally I had the Woodland Scenics fibers, but those are only like 1 to 3 millimeters. I then purchased a number of Silflor 6 millimeter fibers, and I also have some darker green 4 millimeter fibers that I've mixed in there for varying heights. I think this color that I have here looks a little too lush for what I'm going for. That might be good for the lower level, and it's fine in small patches. I'm going to keep that, but I actually made 2 more orders, and now I have all of the colors of the Silflor fibers. So originally I think I had autumn, and then I can't remember, late summer, but I've picked up spring and some golden wheat color as well, and I think having all those is certainly useful because I can combine them in all sorts of different mixtures to create different grass colors. So anyway, expect the grass up here to be a little more lightly colored than you see there. But another exciting thing is I've tested a little bit of the Ponderosa pines out. I got some Scenic Express super trees, just the armatures. It's actually a natural plant product, but they look really great. And then, so I spray painted those sort of a dark brown, and then I feel like the light isn't good. Then I painted the ends with glue, basically a glue mixture, and then using some really short 2 millimeter fibers, I was able to make these pine trees. So the shape of this one isn't perfect. I think it needs a little more of a point to it at the top. So if you look up Ponderosa pines, they don't look like your big fir trees that you'd imagine sort of in Washington. They're, I don't know, they're a little different. So this is honestly pretty close to what an actual Ponderosa pine looks like, and I love having the texture of the little fibers on the end there. They actually look like pine needles. So I did the same method on these two. So I'm just testing it out and seeing how it looks. And of course I'll also use the same tree structure for all the other deciduous trees on the layout, which is awesome. So glad to have figured that out. But other than that, that's all the scenery that I've tried out since the last update. I'm happy to have all the materials that I think I will need from here on out. So figured that out finally. And then the only other thing I did in here is I kind of smoothed out where I think the road will go. It was a little too up and down, and I think it even still is a bit. So I'll add some more. That's just joint compound that I smoothed out a little bit to create a flat surface for our road that'll head up the hill there. So then, as we turn this way, one thing you might notice is I've painted much more of the backdrop. I only have one coat on as of now, and you'll probably notice that it's pretty faint in some areas. You can still see the original paint behind it, so that'll require a second coat, of course. I'm not done, but it is nice to just get a sense of what that'll look like, looking blue like a sky, which is nice. And I feel like it makes the scene feel much bigger than when we have that dark hardboard color up there. And I moved this building out. The brewery is sitting right there because I had to paint the backdrop, in case you were wondering. Okay, and then moving down this way, the other thing you will really notice is that I have done a little bit of the scenery substructure down here as well, and I actually made a relatively significant decision. So as I was building this big hill down here, I started to think a little bit more about how am I going to hide the hole we have in that wall there. And originally I thought, well, we'll just place trees strategically and that should do the trick, but I realized there was honestly not a real way to mask that hole in the wall other than doing a tunnel. So I've decided we're going to do a tunnel portal here, even though there's only one tunnel in the state of Nebraska and it's not even in operation, and I'm already sort of using artistic license because we have our tunnel down there for the reverse loop. I had to sort of give in, and I decided, you know what, the best way and the coolest way to make that a believable scene is to put a portal there. So that's what we're going to do, and you can see the mock-up here. This is really all just scenery rough-in, so this is just the beginning stages. But all the way through here, I finally have the paper substructure in, and even on the other side as well. So now you can get a sense of this whole scene, what it'll look like with the tracks up above and down below. and that tunnel there. So I think that's looking pretty cool. And the portal itself, I think I'm gonna make my own. I looked at a number online, but I feel like the best way to do it is to just cast my own. And I found a prototype. It was, I might throw the photo in here, but this one guy who's modeling a Canadian Pacific line that's since been abandoned, there's a really cool tunnel where the rocks sort of cut diagonally across the tunnel so that it has wings on it, like the wings that come off the portal, except one is going out forward and one is sort of behind, or actually I don't think there's one on this side, but nonetheless the rocks come out this way and then they exit out behind, and that leaves some of the portal liner exposed, which is kind of a cool look, and that's actually necessary here because that's a very narrow shelf there. So anyway, just trying to explain that so you have some visual sense of what that might look like eventually. And then the other cool thing is I planned it out so that we'll have sort of like a modern concrete culvert somewhere in here, and then this drops down. You can't really tell because the lighting doesn't highlight it very well, but this is actually quite a bit lower, and then it even drops off further where that line is. And I'll have to cut this paper out when I cut the sub roadbed out, because I'll also have to bring the fascia down as well, but I'm going to put a creek there, so there'll be a water feature up here, and then we'll probably do a couple of those BLMA bridges here, and I'll probably do them separate because the tracks are so far apart, and that'll be pretty cool to have a creek running through there, especially if you're a train heading sort of south or east, looking up, you'll be able to see that creek. So anyway, that's looking pretty cool in here. Hopefully you guys agree. I'm not totally done with the scenery rough in yet. I still have to add a third tier up there as well as over here, and then I've got to work on going over that portal and then covering that brace there with another mountain hill sort of thing like you see on the other side. So yeah, that's in the works, but now I have most of the backdrop painted, I think. I'm trying to think what else we talked about. I'll walk down here so you guys can see what the big open scene looks like from this end. So here you can see how the two scenes blend together. It sort of wraps around the end of the backdrop there. And the backdrop, I think I'm going to get some of those plastic corner guards there and then blend that into the existing backdrop. That way it's not going to be that exposed, ugly 2x4. I'll actually finish that up. I just haven't yet. But anyway, this is a really cool scene. We have a little hill there, and then you could stand right here, see the trains come out of the portal, and if you waited long enough, then you'd see that same train go down below through that horseshoe curve. So anyway, pretty cool looking area over here. And then the last thing to talk about, nothing I have completed yet, but I was just playing around. Actually, my dad suggested this. He grabbed that bridge there and just kind of played around with putting it over the yard, and it looked pretty cool. So I thought, hey, we should definitely do that. And conveniently, we are modeling this yard in the Twin Cities. Originally, I had specified that it would be an imaginary yard that BNSF built in St. Paul. But as many of you guys know, BNSF has a very big yard in Minneapolis. That's a Northtown yard. And they have a cool railroad bridge cutting across the yard. So originally we were going to have just like a highway or interstate overpass. I think we're still going to do that on the far end of the yard there, or maybe the far end here. But then sort of somewhere in the middle, we're going to have a sort of a through girder type bridge span that goes over the yard with a track on it, which should be pretty cool, and that'll provide plenty of photography opportunities. And then that bridge is still going to be used. I talked about this a few updates ago. We're going to throw that right in here, and it's really faint, but I sort of etched out on the fascia where I need to cut that out. So that'll be kind of a pain because I should have done that ahead of time, but I didn't know that was where it was going to go originally. So anyway, plans change and you have to adapt, so we'll figure that out. Anyway, I think that's really all I have for this update. I'm sure I forgot something, but that just means there's more to talk about next time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, of course, leave that in the comments box below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But other than that, just stay tuned, and I'll see you guys next time.